Hey guys, I'm Dov, and today I'm back with more Total War Warhammer 2 online action. Today we're here with the Vampire Counts. We're going to be taking on the Greenskins. Wanted to take the opportunity to talk a little bit about this matchup and about the Greenskins in general. The Vampires are one of the tougher opponents for the Greenskins. I would say for the Vampires, the Beastmen and the Greenskins are probably the two easiest matchups because they both lack fire damage. They both don't have the best magic damage options. I mean, they do both have access to Lore of Death, but at the same time, you know, you don't have a lot of the other, like Lore of Fire, for example. So in general, ethereal units are going to be very good, and regenerating units are going to be very good against those two factions. Of course, the vampires can bring those in spades. Moreover, the Greenskins, more so than the Beastmen, tend to struggle with large, armored, single-model entities, like big armored monsters. Particularly the Tomb Kings, you know, and the Vampire Counts are two factions that can definitely put some pain on them. The Lizardmen, likewise, have lots of big armored creatures that can be tough for the Greenskins to deal with. They just don't have a lot of anti-large armor piercing. So let's go ahead and just take a look at the builds here, and we'll talk about some more things. Red Duke up on the dragon here. Got all his abilities, well, not all of them, but we've got Elseef, Foe Seeker, Raise Dead, Dance Macabre, Invocation, and of course the Dragon Breath. We've also got a Banshee for that ethereal cheap terror option, and two Terror Geists for the elite anti-large armor piercing, poison, all that jazz. We've also got a Mortis Engine to kill elite tier infantry, and a Corpse Cart to help support the main line, which is just a mix of skeleton swords and spears for a nice cheap fodder-centric line. For my opponent, he's got two mobile squads here, Force Goblin, Spider Rider Archers, and some Goblin Wolf Rider Archers here, and the mirror over here, except this time it's the Mangy Marauders. Armor Piercing Missile is going to be very useful here. Main line for my opponent is a mix of Black Orcs and the two Regiment of Renowned Gobos. We've also got the Arachnarok Queen, Wurzag, and the Broken Tusk Mob. So Wurzag is one of the options the Greenskins do have for magic damage. The Fists of Gork he has will give magic damage to whoever he casts it on in melee. He likewise has FG to get, which does direct magic damage, good against characters in particular. So let's see how my opponent's able to use those tools he has here. And yeah, of course, the Arachnarok Queen. Generally, the vampires struggle with large armored monsters, although with recent patches, the Terror Geists have somewhat changed that. Terror Geists are a very strong monster right now and can do a lot of damage to big armored monsters like this Arachnarok Queen. So let's see how my opponent's able to do it here. He does drop that FG to get in the front line on this Banshee. He's going to start taking quite a bit of damage right off the bat, and you can see he does kind of poke the Banshee right into these skeleton spears. That being said, it doesn't quite finish the Banshee off, and because we're going to be able to pull back in range of some of these healing units, you know, this Unholy Lodestone and Mortis Engine both heal. So because of that, I think the FG that gets going to be a little bit wasted in the end. May have been more worthwhile to try and use it, you know, on the Red Duke and then collapse with an Alpha Strike with the Arachnarok Queen and some of these other units here, but you can see the Banshee's now turning around and starting to get some hits on Wurzag, and he's not going to like that too much. The Spider's not really here to support very effectively, and Wurzag is casting some magic in the main line here, but we're just going to stick that Banshee on him, and he's going to have a hard time now. If he were to self-buff with Fists of Gork, he could beat the Banshee down, no problem at all. But without that, he's going to struggle, and the Banshee will be able to do a lot of damage here. Likewise, the Mortis Engine kind of coming and pinning him in there. And you can see the Arachnarok Queen and the Broken Tusk Mob are mostly focused on the Terror Geist here in the Red Duke. We're kind of in a monster mass situation. Even anti-large armor piercing troops like these Broken Tusk Mob here, who, I mean, Orc Borbor Biggins are the only unit for the Greenskins, I believe, that have anti-large armor piercing. They don't have the best combat stats. Even the Broken Tusk Mob, who are Regiment of Renown, really have pretty poor combat stats. 90 armor on these guys, although the regular Orc Borbor Biggins have less. So I just think that the Greenskins maybe need an anti-large armor piercing option. We'll talk about that a little bit more in just a second, but you can see we're pulling back up into the air wherever we get an unfavorable engagement, and we're just going to try and mirror my opponent's movements with his Lord and with Arachnarok Queen. You can see Wurzag did get routed off there, is now rallied, Going to be dropping another Here We Go here in this front line to give all these guys more melee attack, and you can see the greenskin infantry had no problem mopping up my skeletons. A little bit of mismicro here on my part, leaving these two skeletons just kind of sitting out here, but honestly, they're not going to do much at this point. The skeletons are all gone. The balance power is heavily in my favor because we've done so much damage to Warzog to, you know, damage the leadership here, and because the Arachnarok Queen likewise is also taking a lot of damage. It's a rough situation for the Greenskins overall, despite them winning the infantry fight very decisively. You know, these infantry, when they're in a monster mass situation, it's going to be tough to get that many attacks on a single model entity, and like here my opponent drops another FG to get here on this Mortis engine. Unfortunately though, he just doesn't have the focus fire to be able to take them down. The melee units, you know, when they're getting monster mashed, they get, you know, zombies summoned up to distract them. They can't all get attacks because a lot of the time they're getting knocked over by monsters and so on. So it's a very rough situation overall, but yeah, the Greenskins, maybe if they had an armor-piercing anti-large infantry, that would certainly help. Likewise, you know, they could maybe look at doing a few different things. I also don't think that my opponent maybe brought the best build here. We can talk about that some more in the end screen as well, but overall it's a rough situation for the Greenskins. There's not a whole lot you can do against a very heavy goon build like this. I mean, if my opponent had brought Azag has the speed, at least on his Wyvern, to get away, but he doesn't. I mean, he's not going to be able to stand up in melee, and you do have the Lore of Death to take down ethereal units and, you know, high value units and so on, but he's a little bit more expensive, I believe. I'd have to double check, maybe actually be about the same price, but yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting matchup, you know. I do think that historically the Greenskins have struggled here just because they're generally weak to terror, ethereal units, and regeneration, all of which the vampires have in spades. And yeah, the Greenskins also tend to struggle against the Tomb Kings and the Lizardmen, not quite to the degree that they struggle against the vampires, but overall they're just not great against these large armored monsters, and their lack of anti-large armor piercing options really shows. They do have some great missile options, don't get me wrong, and I think that's honestly maybe the way to go to help counter something like this. You can see at this point it's just the Unbreakable Gobos left. We were able to finish off Warzag, and it is going to be a victory for the vampires. So yeah, let's look at the end screen here, and then yeah, we'll touch on some things briefly. So for myself, I mean, obviously the infantry just got completely crushed. You would expect that. High kill totals all the way across the line, but no XP chevrons. Very telling that these guys didn't kill any high value units. They were just mostly chopping through skeletons. And then at the end of the day, obviously the Terror Guys, the Red Duke, and the Mortis Engine able to do all the damage, taking out Warzag and taking out the Arachnarok Queen. So yeah, on paper this army seems pretty decent up against the vampires, but let's go ahead and take a look at a couple things that we could maybe potentially switch up here. So whoops, not there. Let's actually go here. So for the Greenskins, you know, Warzag and Azag I think are going to be the best options here. Azag has access to Lore of Death. You can put him up in the air or even take him on foot. He has armor piercing either way. I mean, obviously up in the air he has poison, and actually he has better combat stats on foot, interestingly enough. But he does have access to Lore of Death, so you can use that to combat high value targets and you know, ethereal units and so on. Or you can take Warzag, a little bit more goonable, not quite as fast and slippery as Azag, but he does have a very nice spell selection as well. Foot of Gork, you know, you might see heavy cavalry in this matchup, but it may be worth dropping for something like Gaze of Mork to be able to hit ethereal units with this magic missile, or even a Brain Burst, something cheap to proc that Bonewood Staff. But yeah, I think something like this may be a little bit better. So I definitely like a couple of Black Orcs. I think that many may be overkill, so let's instead grab some of these Savage Orc Biggins. These guys are going to be pretty decent in that they have Frenzy, so they're immune to Psychology while that's active. They also have great weapon strength overall with 13 armor piercing and an 8 bonus versus large, so they can definitely help deal damage to those large armored targets. Likewise, another unit that I think is pretty underrated on most people's radar is the Orc Error Boys. They actually got a little bit of a buff in recent patches. I don't remember exactly when it was, but they have really solid AP values for a quote-unquote non-armor piercing missile unit. They're also decent in melee. You can see they even have the decent melee combatant tooltip here. 23 melee attack, only 14 defense, but 34 total weapon strength means they'll be able to stand pretty well against things like zombies. So as long as you spread them out and they're not all getting collapsed on at the same time, they could be decent in the Vampire Counts matchup. I need to do a little bit more testing with them myself, but something like this, throw in the rusty arrows there, and we're a little bit lacking in mobility, so we may want to remedy that in another way. We could grab, you know, these Mangy Marauders are probably going to be pretty solid. Maybe we'll grab the cheap Spider Rider Archers, and then this leaves us a little bit more funds to do something else. You know, you could grab a few various different things. Maybe grab the Warlord's Boys for that armor sundering, just so the Savage Orc Biggins will be able to do even better. Because, I mean, Savage Orc Biggins, you think about it, Black Orcs, I mean, they're going to just crush any vampire infantry, but I think Savage Orc Biggins would too, so maybe even bringing only 1 or 2 Black Orcs, that frees up your funds to go a little bit wild. And I think that the Orc Airboys, again, I need to do a little bit of testing myself here, but just my gut instinct tells me that they'd be pretty solid in that matchup. They have the AP values to really burst down the Terrorgeist, and you know, they can stand and fight zombies if they get summoned in the backline. The key is, I think, that you don't get terrified away with them, because if they get inundated by zombies and then a Terrorgeist charges them and does a ton of shock damage, that could be enough to terrify them away, so that's going to be a little bit dicey. But overall, I think if you were to maybe cut down a little bit on the Black Orcs and just go with some more different things, I mean, obviously the Unbreakable 8-peak Loonies are going to be pretty solid here just because they're unbreakable, and yeah, you could even bring a few different things at this point. But overall, I think that while they may not have armor piercing, the Savage Orc Biggins with their anti-large can be pretty solid here. The Orc Airboys, I mean, obviously one way to deal with large units is just to shoot them down, and the Orc Airboys are going to be pretty solid at doing that, particularly if you use the Rusty Arrows in tandem. But let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments down below. What do you think about this matchup? What do you like to take as the green skins against the vampires? And yeah, how do you go about things? Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. If you like this kind of content, like and subscribe, and I'll keep it coming with more Total War Warhammer 2 content every single day. So we'll see you next time.